Welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, hosted by Todd DeVoe, where planning meets reality.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are at in this fine land. And my name is Todd DeVoe, host of Business Continuity Today and the Director of Emergency Management at Titan HST. And we are going to get into, it's flu season and COVID is back, or did it ever leave? So what do? I just got back from the International Association of Emergency Managers Conference, and a letter came out saying, hey, some people at the conference came down positive for COVID. And so people are starting to take actions on that and testing. Majority of people are coming back negative, I guess, or at least people in my circle. And although one did come back with COVID. And so the question is what do we do? And so now there's two schools of thought, right? One is, do what we're doing now. We're working remotely. And remote working is definitely one of those things that's been working well for a lot of people, a lot of organizations, at least having that backup plan saying, okay, we can always go back to working remotely, even if we're going back to the office. The other thing we could do is do A/B shifts, right? Not have everybody in your office at the same time. And so that's another way of doing it. So only if something does get sick, I suppose, only half your crew goes down at a time instead of the entire office, which I've heard some horror stories of where everybody in the office just went through it like wildfire, right? Everybody picked up the COVID and had to been out for a period of time, which really shut down productivity in the organization. The other side of it too is, stay remote completely, 100%. But the problem with that, which we just talked about a little bit, the problem with that though is, not every organization can work remotely, right? Obviously, service industries such as restaurants and like that, hotel staff, you have organizations like that can't stay remote. Now, one of the things that I think is an interesting paradigm shift is we went from the old days, right? Back when I was I feel like an old man now. Back when I was a kid, you were sick, you went to work sick, right? Unless you were going to the hospital, going to the doctors, and you're required to get a doctor note saying that you're sick, you would show up to work sick. Common cold, flu, whatever, it doesn't make a difference. And so unless you were sent home by your employer. Now, that has shifted to where if you just don't feel well at all, we want you to stay home. You need to be tough on that one right there. It's like, say, hey, if you got the sniffles, don't come into the office because we're work remotely that day, because we don't need that to come into full-blown COVID or flu, right? We used to only be afraid of the flu, which would really knock people out. But now, obviously with COVID being something of serious concern, we have to take a look at that as consideration. So having your people get to the point to where they feel comfortable with going, okay, calling up and saying, hey, I have a head cold going on. I don't know what it is. I'm going to stay home. Go get tested, right? If you test negative, you're great. But we still, probably should stay home and work remotely during that time if remote work is a possibility. We've seen people that are thinking that they're being tough and taking one for the team and going into the office with a head cold, if they think that's what it is, ends up being COVID. And like I said, taking out the entire office. So we have to have that paradigm shift on how do we treat people that are ill. And the other side of it too is the old school of saying, all right, well, if you get sick, in order to be able to use your sick days, you need to get a doctor's note. That's very short-sighted, in my opinion. And doing so puts others at risk because what are the chances of being able to get a doctor's appointment at a moment's notice, unless you're going into urgent care, and if it ends up being whatever it is, you're putting that person again at risk going to these places of getting more ill. So I think again that's short-sighted. I think we should trust our employees and say, hey, if they're feeling ill, they're feeling ill. If it's more than a few days, they probably should be going to the doctors anyway to be able to get treatment. But the point about it is that we have to trust them. As I cough, and we take a look at this, going, what is is it flu? Is it the common cold? Is it COVID? Is it something that's other than, because everything seems to start like flu-like symptoms, right? Because if you say, so again, making sure that we have a plan specifically to have your employees feel comfortable with being able to take the time off from work to be able to get well again, to come in and work for you as 100%. Now, the other side of this is, what are your plans set up for reduction of work staff? When we first were talking about COVID back in 2020, the plan here that we were looking at when we had our pandemic plan is we're looking at somewhere between a 40 and 60% reduction in the workforce, right? The 40 to 60% reduction in the workforce came from two things. One is the workers being sick, the employees themselves, a family member becoming ill that they have to stay home and take care of them, or childcare, right? With the family, with not being able to send the child to school. And we saw that play out, right? I think that statistic bear true with the prediction, going, that's what we're going to lose as far as workforce employees. You need to keep that in mind every time that we're going into this flu, cold, and now COVID season, although COVID seems to be 24/7, 365. But going into that is you need to think of your workforce of a reduction. You can even go in the light end, say a 40% reduction in the workforce. What can you do and how can you perform productivity for your organization at a 40% reduction in the workforce? And I think that should be your baseline planning strategy when you're looking at what you could possibly do. Now, of that 40% reduction in the workforce in the office, and it depends on what your organization does, how many can work remotely, right? So then that kind of alleviates some of that pressure on productivity, but still there's going to be that pretty good size core of your organization that may not be able to be productive during the flu and cold and COVID seasons. So when you're planning for that, right, just take them off the table, right? And so as you're talking to your C-suite, what contingencies do you have? Now, do you go through and hire temporary workers to come and fill during that gap? If you think about schools with substitute teachers, having them on the sideline ready to come in when someone is sick. Do you do a program like that where you have a pool of temporary workers that you can pull in to work when you have that reduction in the workforce? Things like that, thinking outside of the proverbial box, if you will, of how do you keep productivity going? Because at the end of the day, if you are a service industry and remote working doesn't work for you, you need to have somebody to be able to come in on a moment's notice to backfill your employees that aren't going to be able to make it into work for whatever reason that is. On the other side of it is, how are you communicating with your employees? How are you letting them know and your vendors and your customers that if you have to shut down for various reasons, how else can they work with you during that time if you have to shut down for various reasons? How does that communication look, and what system are you using to communicate that information back? Do you have two-way communication? What is, instead of just sending out say an email saying, oh, sorry, we're closed, and it's going to thousands of people, the likelihood of them being able to reply back to you on that normally is pretty low, or at least being able to filter those emails back. But do you have other ways to communicate with your organization, specifically your employees, and then your vendors, and then your customers, on what is happening with your organization? And what does your communications plan look like, right? And so you really have to sit down and not only just write down your reduction in workforce, you also have to take a look at what's your communications plan. How do you get this out to them? And there's various different ways you can do that. Titan HST, we happen to be one of those communication platforms that we'd love to help you out with that. And of course, when you're doing this communication, how many languages are you able to communicate in? Titan HST specifically, when we send out information through our app, and it goes to somebody else who has the app on their phone, it will auto translate to what language that they have their phone set to. So that really helps out with, like, if you live in a cosmopolitan area such as where I'm at, where there's multiple languages. I think there's like 86 languages being spoke, maybe more now. In the area I live, being able to send information out and being able to get that quality product out to the people who are now going to read that, you need to have some sort of multi-language platform, I do believe. So it's more than just, hey, my employee's sick, they can't come to work. It's how do you work within your organization to be able to backfill if you need to be able to communicate that with your staff, and then your vendors, and then your customers. And then how do you keep proper information in people's hands, so they know what's going on? And those are the areas that you really should be working on during flu and cold season. Now we'll say COVID as well. When you're looking to communicate with everybody within the organization and also those that you serve. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for spending time with me today here at Titan HST's Business Continuity today. And, well, for all your communication needs, check out Titan HST, titanhst.com. Until then, everybody, please stay safe. Oh, I forgot. It is the holiday season. Hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving and that you'll be able to spend it with your friends and family. And until next time, stay safe and stay hydrated.